I had no fear. The fear is not in me. My book says fear not, and it's just not there.
In the deadliest war the human race has ever endured, many individual soldiers made positive differences through their thoughtful and courageous actions. One such soldier was Ada, Oklahoma native Major Walter Bobcat Smith, whose fearlessness and quick thinking single-handedly saved an entire German town from certain annihilation. Smith's incredibly bold and heroic act would occur in the spring of 1945, just 5 years after he graduated as a second lieutenant from the New Mexico Military Institute. His commission came in 1941, just 2 months before the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, bringing the United States into World War II. With that unprovoked attack, his fate, like that of so many other young Americans, had been sealed. Smith reported to Fort Knox in Kentucky and soon began training with tank battalions. While he was training in the California desert, Smith trapped and subsequently tamed a wild bobcat, thus earning him the nickname. More importantly, his earlier military school experience was giving him an edge over many other enlisted men.
In 6 months, I was promoted from second lieutenant to first lieutenant. 6 months later, I was promoted from first lieutenant to captain, but while I was first lieutenant, I commanded a medium tank company in Louisiana maneuvers, and I received high marks there, so the tactics that I knew fit right in with what was about to happen. When I reported for my physical, they asked what theater I would like, and I gave the Caribbean, and that didn't make any difference either. I was sent to Europe.
Smith had earned the rank of captain by the time he and his men arrived on the coast of France. Smith was commander of the 69th Amphibian Tractor Battalion, which was part of the 6th Armored Division of the 3rd Army. Known as the Super 6th, this feared and successful fighting division was led by then Major General George Patton.
We were supposed to land on Utah Beach, wound up on Omaha Beach because that was the only thing opening, because we were going to have to get up enough speed to beach our craft with all of the laden material on it. And so they opened up the motors. It was just all they would do. We were kicking up bodies of drowned soldiers as we went up. When they gave me the go, I was first tank off. My front end of the tank made it right, the left side made it right, but the right side dropped down into a bomb hole. Well, my driver caught that real quick, and he gave the throttle all it'd do, but the right engine drowned out completely. So I went across the beach and up the hill, put, and of course, when I got to the top of the hill, I stopped because if you let them run, they would dry out the other cylinders in both engines, and that's what I was doing. I looked back, and there hadn't anybody else gotten off that's going to let the tide go out a little further. And while I was trying to get my engines all running, well, here come a Jeep, turned crossways in the road in front of me. Guy got out, pulled out his .45, came walking toward me. He says, "Get out of that tank, Captain, you're under arrest." I says, "What on earth for?" He said, "General Patton said anybody that stopped was yellow, and it was us to arrest him and bring him to him." I reached over and pulled back the bolt on my .30 caliber and let it slam shut, and I said, "I'll tell you one thing, there's no SB gonna put me under arrest while I'm in this tank and got this .30 caliber in my hand. I suggest you get that back in your holster and you get it back in that Jeep and get out of my way." And that's what he did, and pretty quick. And of course, after my motors dried out a little bit, I started on up the road. I hadn't gotten 30 yards, I saw another Jeep sitting up there, turned crossways. I said, "Oh my, I got this to go through again." And just as I was thinking that, he pulled out in the road, headed down the road in front of me with a sign on the back, says, "Follow me."
The mission of the Super Sixth was to clean up the north coast of France, moving from east to west, a mission that Smith and his fellow soldiers accomplished in little more than a month.
We were ordered to go as fast as as we could and still everybody keep up. So a lot of times I was doing 30, 35 miles an hour right down the highway going to Brest. And the 6th Armored Division at this point, with 79th Infantry, was supposed to support the 6th Armored Division. We ran off and left them. We made 250 miles in 10 days alone. We were the only armored division in history of anybody's army that made the breakthrough and exploited that breakthrough alone. The 79th, when we got to Brest, was 129 miles behind us.
At Brest, the 6th and 7th Armored Divisions joined forces and started the long northeastward trek across France, Belgium, Luxembourg, and finally into Germany. Before they would finish some 7 months later, the advancing Allied divisions would engage the German army on many occasions, including the epic Battle of the Bulge at Bastogne, fought in freezing cold conditions. A wily soldier, Smith escaped death several times.
I got up to this crossroad and there was an infantryman there, had the message, said, your orders are to wait here at the crossroads till the infantry comes up to outpost of tanks for the night. I said, okay. And there was another tank facing my tank, and I hadn't eaten in 3 or 4 or 5 days that I could remember. So I told my gunner, I said, well, get me a C ration out. So he got the C ration. He went down to get the C ration, and I was leaning up against the tank, and about that time, there's a rifle bullet hit right between the back of my head and the tank. Boy, I mean, I moved, and I handed him my binoculars and anything else that was loose, and I said, I'll be back in a little bit. I pulled out my hatchet and went over about 5 beet rows. This beets was about that tall, and I eased up through there till I thought I'd be about where he could have seen me crawling, and I raised up just enough to see through the beets, and I had passed him, maybe 15 feet. He was raising up, trying to see where I was still. So I got my hatchet out and I eased through the beet rows. I got up close enough that I figured I could get him, and he had on his little cap. He didn't have on a steel helmet. This night he'd already pulled his helmet off. He's looking, and I mean, before he knew it, I planted that hatchet in the back of his head and like not pulled it out. It had gone in a little too deep. So I finally got it out, walked back down to my tank, and there's a little puddle of water between my tank and this other tank. And my gunner I said, get me that C ration. And I turned around and I took my hatchet, and I still had some brains and some blood hanging on. I washed it off in a puddle of water, and he herped all over the side of my tank. I said, forget it. I didn't want any C ration after that.
By the end of February 1945, the Super Six had penetrated German lines, and the end of the European conflict was in sight. They took Bitburg, Martinshausen, Mannheim, and Heidelberg without much resistance. A month later, the 6th crossed the Rhine near Frankfurt, successfully cracking the Nazi midsection. A few days later, Smith found himself and his 69th Battalion on the outskirts of Friedberg, Germany, which was still occupied by Nazi troops. Initially, there was a bit of confusion on exactly how to advance on Friedberg. Smith and other battalion leaders decided to discuss it.
Up on the right side of him, I pulled up so we could talk without having to tie up our radios if they needed them, for a request of artillery. And I hadn't much worn crossed the ditch and still moving till they fired a big long burst of anti-aircraft right down between. Didn't miss my elbow or a foot. I mean, just plowed up the ground between us. Well, that one big long burst was all they fired. Well, they didn't have to tell us to get back over the ridge. I mean, I took off and he took off. We got back over the ridge, so we couldn't be seen. So I went on around to the right. I hit a little trail that went down to a railroad bridge, and we get up there, and I see a lieutenant German lieutenant sitting on the curb with his head in his hands like he'd lost his last friend. And the idea hit me. If he looks like what I think, and of course what happened in Martinshire, that my crew saw the Germans come into town, and with their uniforms on, they'd go into a building. In just a few minutes, they'd come back out with civilian clothes on and act like not anything was going on, not even a war. And that hit me. And so I thought, if Martinshire did that, Friedberg may be right. So I asked him if he would accompany me into Friedberg and show me where the German headquarters was. He said a little bit, and jawohl. I says, yes. I put the lieutenant on the front end of my Jeep, and then he got off and got a piece of sheet or something, white flag, and it was about that long, about that wide, tied it on the front end of my Jeep, and here we go toward Friedberg.
On his way into town, Smith navigated through several roadblocks with the assistance of the captured German lieutenant. None of the Nazi soldiers showed any signs of resistance. Instead, they helped Smith make his way toward German headquarters inside the Friedberg Castle. Once there, Smith met with Captain Volk, the German commander of the inner defenses, and demanded the unconditional surrender of the town. The date was March 29, 1945.
We're giving you an ultimatum of the unconditional surrender, or we're going to burn the town. And so he stood and thought a minute, and he looked up and he said, I'll leave it in the hands of your commander. And I said in German, Danke schön, and we started talking then about drawing up the papers on how the surrender would be handled, because here we have 1,500 soldiers or more. There's some drifted in that they didn't even know about, I think. And the two big guns that we knocked out were supposed to be there to help defend it. That's not going to work. And there's 15,000 women and children that had drifted in to Friedberg because it was one of the few towns still standing and wasn't bombed heavy. We sent a German with our driver to tell the people in the outer district that the surrender had been made for 12 o'clock noon, and for them to act accordingly. They stacked their arms in the barracks area and have it all done before 12. Well, here come this captain of the outer defenses, stark raving mad. And of course, these people are still on top of the buildings, the riflemen, in case anything happens. And he said, what's this I hear about a surrender? Not gonna be a surrender. Captain Wolf, who was standing behind me, said, I surrendered my command, the inner defenses. That's over and done with. Now it's legal in Germany for him to either shoot Captain Wolf or to say, I'll take over from here, or whatever, or even a private could do that. That's legal in the German army. Whoever is still willing to fight can take over command of whatever is left.
Smith found himself face to face with Captain Straub, who could have single-handedly ended the surrender negotiations.
When I drew my pistol and Captain Straub started backing up, he looked around and I looked around, and my driver was right close to my machine gun, and he knew that. So we wouldn't have gone out without some kind of fight. Yeah, I didn't even realize I had drawn my gun. I knew I had it in my hand, but it was reflex action all together. It wasn't something I made up my mind to do. It just happened, that's all. Well, if he's going to die for the Fuhrer, I was going to accommodate him. That's simple as it can be put.
Straub ultimately realized that Friedberg would be quickly and completely destroyed by U.S. artillery fire unless he backed down. The lives of at least 15,000 civilians, many of who were watching the confrontation, hung in the balance.
Most of them are thinking, we hope that Major Smith wins this argument. That's what most of them thought. what he was thinking is that if they fought and they all died, what would it be for? Nothing. Be for nothing. And that's what would happen to them. But the way I felt, that seeing what happened in Martinsville, that they wanted out of this war, and we would have a battle for sure, and we would lose some men, maybe a lot. I don't know what the outcome would be. We would be victorious, but I don't know what it would cost. Why shouldn't I see if I can arrange a surrender without firing a shot? If I lost one man, I wouldn't give it for the whole town. That's the way I felt. I did not know that Hitler had given direct orders to the soldiers in Friedberg to fight from every house to the last man. Every house would be a bastion of defense. I didn't know until I got in that there had been a general in Friedberg the evening before with a engineer battalion that they would use to mine and all that kind of stuff if they were going to fight for Friedberg. He recognized what was coming across the Mainz River toward Friedberg, and he pulled out late in the evening on the 28th with his troops. Now, that's one of the things that they would do, would mine all the roads and around Friedberg, so it may be difficult for us to get. It wouldn't be that we wouldn't complete our mission, but it may be costly to complete.
Straw backed down, and Smith spent the next 3.5 hours negotiating the unconditional surrender of Friedberg.
The troops who agreed to surrender were marching out to the south barracks at the top of the hill. The trains came up, and they had their guns and everything marching, and they did put me on a parade. I'll tell you, it was a smart march, and I know they were doing it just to show off, but they did it. I found out just a few days later that Hitler had made this line across with Friedberg the centerpiece, and it was to be held at all costs. Of course, Friedberg would be ideal in coming right up the middle of Autobahn number 3, and Buchsbaum and Budiken fit right in the line to hold. So I didn't know that, until I got in and talked to Germans. But that was Hitler's orders, and of course, that's supposed to be obeyed in the German army. It don't work that way in our army. We see something that needs to be done, or we think needs to be done, it's our privilege to go do it, just as I did this. There was a town just east of Friedberg. At about this same time it went on, that part of the 90th Division that was supporting the 4th Armored Division, they took this town. They left 9 men in it to take care of everything, get everything together. There were a bunch of SS in there. They jumped these 9 men, killed all 9 men of them, took their guns, and they started fighting again. That's just a short distance from Friedberg that happened. And they lost a lot of men just 9 miles east of Friedberg, where the SS set 2 traps for them. They killed a lot of Americans.
Despite the threat of SS retaliation, the German people were ready for the surrender. They knew, as well as the Nazi army, that the war was all but over. They wanted peace, and they wanted to get on with their lives.
It was a big deal to them. They were some of them just waving their hands just slightly, so that Straub or none of the rest of the SS could see him. They wanted it to happen. The townspeople, civilians, they wanted it to happen.
In fact, the people of Friedberg knew the Allied forces were advancing toward them and wanted to send a message of surrender independent of the German army. During his stop in Friedberg, Smith met a young woman who took a great risk in order to bring peace to her town.
Her father told her the day before to go up on top of the castle and put out a white flag. She went up the stairs and got on top of the first floor above ground and started to walk over where she could put the white flag where it could be seen. There was a SS soldier there, and I believe it was an officer, that told her if she hung that white flag out, he would kill her. And she didn't put out the white flag. And she told me later that she was scared to death they was going to kill her anyway because she had the white flag in her hand.
After the successful surrender of Friedberg, the Super Sixth continued east toward Berlin. 2 weeks later, Smith and his fellow soldiers played a role in liberating Buchenwald, one of the largest Nazi concentration camps.
What you see is almost unbelievable. Of course, on the front gate of Buchenwald, it had a big sign that said "Arbeit macht's free." That means if you work hard, you'll be free. There's nothing to that. You worked yourself to death, period. But I went in and look around, I see little rooms with wooden shelves in them from floor up almost to the ceiling, and that's where they slept at night. And most of them were so skinny they couldn't hardly do anything but just smile at you. They knew that they were relieved. And I went down where there was the cremation vats, where there's 3 in a row and wagon out on the concrete ramp with bodies on it and a pitchfork beside it. Well, our bombers had damaged their gas line, so they didn't have fuel to cremate, so they had dug a big pit up just outside the gate and just overlooking the valley, and it was just full of bodies. We had trouble at first. We tried feeding them just a low base potato soup, and even that much they would go into shock and die, so they had to start feeding them intravenously to save some of them. But there's a lot of them still died after we left even.
By the end of World War II, Smith had spent a total of 17 months overseas, had ascended to the rank of major, and had earned a Bronze Star and 2 Silver Stars. He also earned 4 Purple Hearts, having been wounded once in France in 1944 and 3 times in Germany in the spring of 1945. His proudest accomplishment, however, remained saving the town of Friedberg and its 15,000 civilian inhabitants from certain death. On March 29, 1995, 50 years after he saved the town through the peaceful negotiation of surrender, the people of Friedberg brought Smith back to honor him. A monument to Bobcat Smith's courageous act now stands in the center of the town, a constant reminder that Friedberg was mercifully spared from the physical, emotional, and spiritual devastation of war.
That sign right there is in the castle grounds, right in front of the home where the surrender took place. School kids, many of them have to pass that every morning, and they quiz them to see if they read it and know what's on it. They promote it. Their town was not hardly damaged. Their people are still alive. They have their freedom from Hitler. It could have been real different. if they'd started to fight, there would be no Friedberg. The name may still be there, but there wouldn't be anything left standing. Because we gave them an opportunity. Luckily or sensibly, they took advantage of it and agreed to our demands. And that's the way they try to teach their kids, is, hey, it's wrong to do what Hitler did, but it's right to be friends and have friends and treat them decent.